right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Destroy All Neighbors, a new horror comedy that's out right now on Shudder from writer Charles Pieper and director Josh Forbes. This is a ridiculous mix of rock and roll, prog rock to be exact, and splatter gore. And it is ridiculous, and we have a fun time talking about it. Joining me is Jonathan Martin. He's a filmmaker and the founder of the FilmQuest Film Festival, and I've been wanting to have him on here for years, so I'm really happy to have him here. And we have a great conversation, lots of great puzzle pieces to get into, including a lot of favorites of mine, so it'll be a fun one. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, wherever you're listening right now. You can hit that follow or subscribe button. Make sure you find out about all the episodes we have on the way, because there are a lot of episodes in the can that will be hitting the feed very soon. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. And don't forget to join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. So with that said, let's get into this conversation about Destroy All Neighbors. All right, it's time to get into Destroy All Neighbors. This is going to be such a fun one. Joining me, we've got Jonathan Martin from FilmQuest. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I am doing well. I'm enjoying, not really, the cold weather out here in Utah. We got hit this last week with a lot of cold snow, and so, just I'm kind of bundled up in my Obi-Wan Hobo
Yeah.
poncho right now, kind of making that happen. But how are you, sir?
I was just there over Christmas break, and it's so cold that like it stops being cold. It's like you don't even register it anymore.
Yeah. I think there comes a point. I mean, fortunately, we have a dry cold, not to bore everybody with anything like that, but we do have we're not like a wet cold, so I'm thankful for that. But once it starts
Yeah.
anything under freezing, you're just over. You just don't want it. Now, Sundance is coming up this week, and I've got to be there this weekend. And so
Yeah.
I already kind of have gotten over Sundance, so to speak. And so, but the fact that it's going to be really cold is that's not going to add to my joy. But it should be a good time all the same. It'll
Yeah.
be a good time all the same.
Absolutely. So, I'm super excited to have you here on the show. Back when I started this podcast like 6 years ago, you were on the back of my mind as one of the people I might eventually reach out to. And it just worked out that this movie has a FilmQuest connection with its writer, Charles Pieper. And so it just felt like the perfect time to finally get you on here. Tell my listeners a little about you. And, obviously you're a filmmaker as well, aside from FilmQuest, like everything that you do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, first things first, it's great to be able to have Charlie having a film, and not just like a film, like a feature film that he made for like 10 grand or something like that, right? It's nice that it was
Sure.
actually a film that has some, I don't want to, every film has some significance, but it's nice to see somebody that you obviously care a lot about through the festival and
Sure.
stuff like that.
And it's got buzz. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's talking about it this week that we're recording this.
Have some significance, right? Have some gravitas.
Sure.
But as for myself, as you mentioned, I'm a filmmaker. I'd say I'm a filmmaker first and foremost, as far as that goes. Speaking of features and all that sort of thing, I haven't been able to make a feature yet, but I've had a lot of success with my short films and my music videos as well. I've played quite a few film festivals with those. Been fortunate enough to win quite a few accolades for those films. But they come and go, right? And the projects go, and so you look for things. Right now, I'm actually doing a documentary for the state of Utah about their new state flag that they passed into legislation, and there's some tales I could tell about that without getting into it, but that's been fun. And then also, of course, I run FilmQuest, which we just had our 10th anniversary season. I guess this year's our 10th year of existence, but last year was actually our 10th season, and that ended up being a really, really big event. It kind of felt like it exploded in many ways. And festivals take a while. If you don't have a few $1 million to back you, you got to put your shoulder to the wheel and really kind of stick with it. And fortunately, of course, we've had you You're an
Yeah.
alumni of FilmQuest as well, full disclosure, David, and,
Mhm.
that's how we obviously met, and, yeah, so, I'm fairly active in the community up here in Utah, but I'm back and forth between LA quite a bit, and my wife is an actress as well, and I guess I'll
Right.
I'll give her a little shout out. She's an actress, and she just did, 3 feature films last year, actually, that,
Nice.
they're in various stages of release or completion, and together we did a project, based it was an audition film for, Masters of the Universe for the role of Tila,
Yeah.
and so if you go onto YouTube and check out Tila and the Masters of the Universe, that's my wife, and we made that together, and we did get 1,000,000 views out of it, so that was pretty cool. So
Hell yeah.
not too bad for a little audition piece for a film they ended up canning. So there it is. And that's a tale for another day about how that even all came into being. So,
Sure,
but
sure.
that's it in a nutshell, and so that's kind of fun. So there it is.
Right on, right on. Well, I'm really excited to talk about this one. I mean, obviously, I'm a musician. I love gore. I love dick and fart jokes. Like I love the ridiculous stuff. So this movie it just kind of throws all that in a blender, and I think that there will be a lot of really fun puzzle pieces to get into with this one. So we'll get into what we liked and maybe didn't like along the way, but let's just start jumping into puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first puzzle piece here for Destroy All
Yeah,
Neighbors?
and so this is obviously I'm new to your show, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping I'm on the same groove. I'm gonna start with, this film kept kinda coming to mind as I was watching it, whether it was intentional or not, and it's a film I dig. I haven't seen it a ton, maybe twice, but I do dig it, and it's Phantom of the Paradise.
Mm,
And I think maybe a little bit of that, it's a horror rock opera setting up the kind of the rock musical tropes of the time, maybe films like Tommy and what have you, obviously setting up Phantom
sure.
of the Opera. But I think the element of the music and the music being such a strong um, push on the story, so to speak. That just came to me a lot, and then obviously the death and the murder and the mayhem that comes with it. It's just something that just came to mind.
Absolutely. That intersection of rock music and just like big dramatic music. I mean, this is obviously centered around prog rock, so
Right.
definitely, big music. But between that and horror, that's a great one to kick it off with. And I haven't seen it in like 20 years at least. I definitely need to revisit that one of these days. I really need to go on just a whole De Palma kick, honestly, and go down the rabbit hole. But yeah, it's a great one to kick it off with. I'm just going to jump right on top with another movie that kind of rock music and horror going hand in hand. I'm going to Return of the Living Dead, one of my favorite zombie movies. Just a totally punk rock zombie horror comedy that feels like the perfect comparison to Destroy All Neighbors and exactly what Charles and the director Josh Forbes were going for with this. Just pure ridiculousness. Not a single care in the world about like you know this being more than just a ridiculous fun horror comedy. I think Return of the Living Dead is like the perfect example of those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think as you're talking about Return and I brought up Phantom, is they're both ridiculous, just going out for kind of the gusto, trying out things. Um, I think Destroy All Neighbors has that element there where maybe it eschews development a little bit for the fun and the mayhem
Sure.
and just getting into it, and let's not waste time with,
Hmm.
30 minutes of exposition. Let's just get right into this guy's problems, his troubles, and let's start letting the blood flow.
Absolutely. And, honestly, for a movie about a creative person who is stuck and in a rut and letting everything like bother him and stop him from working on his creativity, I mean, we've all been there. We don't need to see 30 minutes of figuring out who this guy is. We know who he is. We're all that guy. So, it definitely makes for a nice little shortcut there with this kind of character that Jonah Ray Rodriguez plays. But what do you have for your next piece?
The next one I've got, and I think a lot of the severed heads talking in clever ways on furniture around the apartment and around all the buildings, especially Alex Winters. I thought a lot about Reanimator.
Hmm.
as I was kinda watching the film. Obviously, some gore, some blood. Obviously, Reanimator is a Frankenstein tale. I'm not gonna say this is a Frankenstein tale, but it was that, the practical effects where it's just like, you know that it's just his head, like, just, with a
Yeah.
hole cut out over it, and then some gunk going on. But I think that's a lot of the charm, and you're picked up in the story enough that it doesn't really matter that you know how that trick is being done.
Yeah.
It's an old school, gag, and just kinda seeing that, reminded me a lot of Reanimator.
Yeah, that's a great one, and that is really funny. Like how you totally know exactly what they're doing and how they're achieving these talking heads and stuff like that. I'm gonna go for my next piece to one that I feel like the seams are not visible at all,
Mm.
but another classic of decapitations and gore and practical effects. Peter Jackson's Dead Alive,
Yeah.
which is one of the best, and especially in this movie once our main character William has to start hiding the fact that he's got all these dead neighbors and friends that are like stuck in his apartment. It totally reminded me of the basement in Dead Alive, where he's got like the nurse and he's got the priest, and they're all dead and zombified and messing around with one another, and he's got to like stop them from screwing with each other, while also stopping everyone else from finding out that they're in there. Hijinks ensue. Uh, but goofy, over the top, not even really threatening at all. It's just gore for the sake of goofy gore. And that's why I love Dead Alive. And I think that Destroy All Neighbors really taps into that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Dead Alive, I mean, what is it? Ultimately, he's taking care of his granny, and,
Hmm.
like, okay, and then there's some, kind of, almost actually reminded me of Robert Rodriguez, El Mariachi, where he has some of his scenes where he just speeds up the film really fast and the guy's making a martini or something. They kinda have a little bit of that in Dead Alive too, where it's almost like, "How fast can we get to the gore?" Type of a thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, "Okay, we got this plot that we need to, give you a plot, but how fast can we get to the mayhem and the fun and what you bought a ticket for?" Right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
I
Peter
think that
Jackson's been promising for years he's gonna make one more splatter movie eventually, after all of his big billion-dollar
mm.
projects. We're all waiting. I can't
I
wait.
know, could you imagine what he could do with that now too? Like, with, like, the weight of whatever he's got culminating in
Yeah,
his brain and even the people he could work with now, right? Just to bring that together.
sure.
I'd love to see something with all these, like, highbrow actors just getting, like, gored. That would be
That would
kind of
rule.
fun.
It would be so good. What do you got for your next piece?
Next one is now this one I bring in because I think there was an aesthetic in the cinematography and the color palette, and maybe even a similarity in the budget when it was all said and done that reminded me a lot. And then, of course, there was gore in it as well, a little different type of gore. But Hobo with a Shotgun, the
Mm,
visual color palette of it just kind of kept reminding me of the real saturated colors. Destroy All Neighbors, there's very strong, kind of a warmer palette. Obviously, there's shocks of blue and shocks of pink and shocks of red, but and the greens. I mean, it plays with all of it, and whenever it brings in that color palette, that's where Hobo with a Shotgun kind of, felt to me. And of course, Hobo, which has been a little while since I've seen it, and, I mean, that's another gore piece if you haven't
sure.
seen it, and, it's definitely there's the word I'm looking for is, while not story, and I don't know if the filmmakers would have even, used this as a frame of reference, but there's just a visual aesthetic that seemed very similar to me, taking aside the attempt at grindhouse that Hobo with the Shotgun was doing. You gotta put
Sure.
that away there, but visually, there was echoes of that to me, at least.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the recent attempts at grindhouse, movies, they kind of are grindhouse, but at the same time, they're trying to do a lot with a little, and a lot more than grindhouse movies
Yeah.
were ever really trying to do. I've actually never seen Hobo with a Shotgun. I've always wanted to. I'm gonna have to check it out one of these days. It looked like a lot of fun, and exactly the kind of way that you would hope a movie called Hobo with a Shotgun would be. Um, yeah, I got to check that out. I'm going to go with one that maybe is around that same-ish budget. It's from a couple of years ago, PG Psycho Goreman. Another rock and roll comedy gore fest. This about a very like guar-like creature who basically helps a little girl on an adventure. And again, this is going to be, I think, through practically all of our puzzle pieces here. It's just that combination of do-it-yourself aesthetics, gore, blood, just rock and roll comedy, and just pure ridiculousness. You could almost see the kid's sister in Psycho Goreman like growing up to be a rock star in a lot of the ways, like the way the Destroy All Neighbors character is, and ending up in a situation like this. Maybe Psycho Goreman comes back and helps her out, just like everything happens here. So
Yeah.
it's a fun movie though.
I've been wanting to see that actually. I remember seeing the trailer for it a few times, and that's definitely been on my to-do list as far as it went. I remember my dad saw the trailer for it of all people. He was all like, "They make movies like this? Why?" And he like knows they make movies like this, but I think he just didn't realize that they still made movies like that.
Sure,
And he's
sure,
all like, "Why would anybody want that?" And I'm sitting here like, "Because it probably is going to make money." You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's probably gonna find an audience and probably make his budget back, and yes,
yeah.
this is real. So, that's actually, that's something I'm definitely gonna have to put on my list as we're talking on here.
It's funny the idea of like who would watch that. I think if you were to make circles of the people who go to FilmQuest and the people who would watch Psycho Goreman, it would just be like one circle on
Right,
top
right,
of
right.
itself.
What do you call that? Like, what's the diagram when you put the 2 circles together and you see the
Right.
cross section? Like, there it would be like a perfect, like,
Yeah.
solar eclipse happening there, right?
Yes.
Like, at
Exactly.
the worst, like an annular eclipse,
Yes.
like,
Absolutely.
that would
Yeah.
definitely be in that group.
What do you got for your next puzzle
So
piece?
for my next puzzle, this one might be the most obvious, I think. I could be wrong, but, Evil Dead 2. I
Hmm.
think, there's some slapstick horror in there. Obviously, while they're 2 definitely very different leading men, in terms of characters, you've got Ash, who obviously gravitated from the first Evil Dead and is just kind of like a nobody everyman that becomes this, even though he's slaying demons and he's destroying deadites, while these aren't quite deadites in the film, there's definitely that, and obviously not the Three Stooges type comedy. There is that physical humor that you could see at times. They're throwing around the bodies. There's the blood splattering all over him. There's, even the characters themselves as they die, the way they kinda poke fun at him and egg him on.
Yes.
There's a lot of that kind of, that there's kind of a feeling with, and, that was quite a bit of fun, I
Yeah,
think
no,
was
absolutely. I think especially Alex Winter's Vlad character. I mean, that is pure deadite. It's just, just total trash talking. And whereas like an actual horror movie would, scary things happen here, it's more just about funny and ridiculous and just kind of like egging on the main character
Mhm.
just to make them kind of lose their stuff. So it's like it's some really fun Deadite-ish material happening here, and Evil Dead's the best.
Uh,
So
I almost feel like I can't do one of these without bringing up Evil Dead at least once in a conversation.
exactly, exactly. I'm usually the one who does it, but I will go to. So I'm going to actually go for a TV show
Oh.
for another puzzle piece here. I'm going to go with Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story,
Oh.
in which Evan Peters plays Jeffrey Dahmer. It's one of these Ryan Murphy shows, and just like the whole apartment complex setting and like the noises and smells coming through the walls and the completely ineffective building supervisor that just does nothing to help the situation. That's a show that was just a couple of years ago, and I feel like it's
Mhm.
everybody kind of watched it, so maybe it was in the air when this was coming about. But it's a really good show, and just that setting. And there's been, obviously, speaking of Evil Dead, we just had Evil Dead Rise, which took place in an apartment complex. So there's been horror in apartment complexes before, but I felt like the right through the wall aspect of it
Mhm.
reminded me so much of Monster.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned the apartment complex. Obviously, it lends itself to being able to make a film on a budget.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't have to go out to all these locations. In fact, I would almost say the film has maybe 4 locations,
Sounds about right.
like at
Yeah.
most. I mean, you've basically got the apartment complex, the studio, there's kind of a confrontation outside the studio, and then there's, like, the parking lot of the studio. I think that's about your locations in the film.
Yeah.
Might be missing some, but, I mean, that storytelling, and there's obviously different variations of it, Alone at the House or I mean, Rear Window is an apartment complex, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that's all on a studio, all on a stage, and, it's interesting that you bring up, like, some of these things, and when you brought up Evil Dead Rise, because that was an experience. I was having such a good time, and then I totally, I got called a Karen, like, during the
Mhm.
screening because I literally had to tell this girl in front of me to turn off her phone 4 times as she was taking flash selfies during, like, the last
Ugh,
15 minutes, and they
what
all,
is
like, gave me the
happening?
finger and acted like I was somehow in the wrong, and I'm sitting here like, "What is going on?" Like, am I in some weird bizarro verse right now? And that killed me, so I need to go back and watch, like, the last 15 minutes because it was totally took me out. But, you brought up something that kind of triggered me a little bit, not triggered me in a bad way, but it was, sometimes we look at horror and we get so caught up that "Oh, that's not scary, it must be scary, otherwise it's not,"
Mhm.
and it's like, so many of these horror films that we talked about aren't really scary horror
Right.
films, right? It's just yeah, it's in the vein of horror, it's in that world of horror, that's what you would define it as, but you don't have to be scary to be a horror film, it's a totally different tonal experience when you wanna do that, and
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it goes to the fact that right now horror is just absolutely killing it, and part of that reason is because there's such a wide range of what horror is, and it could be so many different things from the Blumhouse films to, these kind of, DIY, smaller, independent horror things, to, The Conjurings and all that stuff. Like, it's just all across the board. There's so many different kinds of horror, and so it really can corner so much of the market.
yeah, and, it makes me, sometimes wonder because coming back to Destroy All Neighbors, because obviously I want Charlie and Co. to have all the success that they can in the world, and it's interesting to see an audience reaction to things as you track kind of IMDb and you see what people saying, and I've always had this thing where Destroy All Monsters is definitely not a film that is hiding what it is. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Sure.
It is not pulling wool over your eyes at all, like,
Yeah.
what this is. It's not baiting and switching you at all. It's like, this has practical effects. It has a charred landlady, like, just, like, talking to you with puppeteering. It's got Alex Winter, um in crazy makeup, like there's gore, there's blood, there's prog rock. Like
Yep.
it's not hiding at all like what the film is. So sometimes I always find that interesting, how people respond to a film that doesn't hide it. And as a little bit as a little bit of something to just aside, I only just found out like the day before it came out this weekend that Mean Girls was actually a musical, the remake that they just came out. And
Yeah, the marketing is
I
insane for
know, and
that.
I'm just like my wife and I, we kept, like, talking to each other, like, is this just like, a straight up remake with Tina Fey in it again? What is going on? Like, we had are they that bankrupt? And then, like, it turns out it was a musical, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"What?" Like, and you look at the audience score on, like, Rotten Tomatoes for that, and it's not that high because a lot of people felt they got baited and switched, with
Right.
the film, and it makes me wonder, it's like, if you would've been upfront, would have it actually been bigger? Would you come
Right.
in? But that's why it's interesting to me when you see certain people maybe be negative towards something or not. It kinda makes it, "Well, did you not watch the trailer? Did you not even look at the poster? Like, what's missing for you here to, like, just kinda go in there?" And, that's just kind of an aside, as we're kinda talking about the genre a little bit generally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. Your last puzzle piece was Evil Dead 2, is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, I've got, well, technically two more, but I'm going to
Oh,
combine them because they actually fit perfectly together, and they both have to do with the ending of this movie. We do get into spoilers on the show.
wow.
In the end of this movie, our hero and a whole bunch of his, undead buddies, they're getting together and they lock themselves in this room, and then they end up having to musical battle against Vlad, who is now big, supersized, and still talking shit. And it is a combination of Airheads and Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny.
Yeah.
Two of the all-time best rock movies. And so if you're going to be inspired by, silly, ridiculous, over-the-top rock and roll movies, come on, Airheads and Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny, you can't do better.
And you know what? I have to give a little FilmQuest shout out to Tenacious D here because Kyle Gass actually won Best Supporting Actor at the film festival a few years ago,
Really?
back in 20 at the 2017 festival, and the film was called Gnaw at the time,
Oh,
Gnaw.
I remember that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they retitled it like Apartment 3, horrible title, like, that they when they released it wide as far as it goes, but just look up Kyle Gass and you'll be able to find it. I think the lead actress was Penelope Mitchell or something like that, but he ended up winning and he came on out to the fest, and so he came that
Nice.
last day, and I asked him later, I was like, "So why'd you come?" He's like, "I just had a feeling I was gonna win." You know? And I mean,
That's real.
I remember it being a very competitive year that year, like, Glenn Morshower was, like, nominated, and he came out, and it was, like, this competitive thing, but he came out, and somebody asked him, like, "So how did you get him in your movie? How'd you get all into this?" And Kyle Gass took the microphone during the Q&A, and he said, "If you want me in your movie, I'll be in your movie, just don't make me audition. As long as you don't make me audition, I will be in your movie." So
Yeah.
for anybody out there who's a filmmaker making a movie and you want Kyle Gass, just don't make the man audition and send him the offer. Done. It sounds that easy. So we'll see.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Who wouldn't want Kyle Gass in their
Yeah.
movie? He's the best. He's awesome. I will read down our list of puzzle pieces here, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts. We talked about Phantom of the Paradise, Return of the Living Dead, Reanimator, Dead Alive, Hobo with a Shotgun, PG, Psycho Gorman, Evil Dead 2, Monster, The Jeffrey Dahmer Story, Airheads, and Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. Of course, lots and lots of horror comedies and rock and roll and all that stuff. I mean, that's of course where this conversation was going to lead. But are there any things we didn't quite get into that you wanted to mention
Um,
other than puzzle pieces?
like and I'm not like an expert in this film or even in this IP. But there's from what I've seen and the sequences and the music and the rock and roll and the prog rock, I kept thinking about it. While it wasn't quite strong enough to be, say, a strong puzzle piece, right? Like maybe it could be like a nub somewhere, but was and it doesn't really relate genre-wise, but I kinda kept thinking of heavy metal a little bit.
I had a feeling that's where you were going. That's a really good pull. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that, especially with this kind of, prog rock and like, I think this movie, Destroy All Neighbors, which we had fun with, like this movie with like a bigger budget probably would have went way into just crazy trip out sequences and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think you would have seen even more heavy metal as an influence here.
Yeah, absolutely, and it feels like even though this is obviously a feature film, like, let's say we put this down and we condensed the story, it would fit very neatly into part of an anthology of, like, heavy metal, right? Like, maybe
Sure.
it's not out there in space, but it could be something like, "Out on the distant planet of Earth, there lives a man," and he comes on in, and he is the master of prog rock, speaking of, I did crack up quite a bit from the prog rock self-help, like the teach yourself prog rock, not teach yourself, but the how-to videos of how the
Yeah.
guy goes in, and there was a few things that quite blend in there, and, it does play a lot with the whole, "Is this really happening? Is this
Oh,
really what he
sure.
says?" He's like, "No, it's time to hide the bodies." On the
Yeah.
tour, and you're like, "Okay." And it's definitely that type of film where it's just like you just buckle in and you go for the ride, you
There
know?
was just a movie like a year ago, and I can't think of what it was, where somebody had like a tape that was talking to them. Like, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but I can't remember it. But yeah, I love all the music stuff in this. You know, as a composer of kind of genreless music that there's not really a specific audience for, so it makes it very hard to market. I definitely get where this guy is coming from, so that I definitely connected with a lot. I'll also say shout out to Kumail Nanjiani and Thomas Lennon in smaller roles, but both hilarious. I haven't seen Kumail Nanjiani in something funny like this in a while. Like he's always been so funny, but he's kind of in Marvel mode for a while and
Yeah.
stuff. And so it was really great to see him in just something weird again. And Thomas Lennon's always great.
Yeah, yeah, and small story on Thomas Lennon, I crossed his line at a bowling alley once, and we were bowling next to each other. This was years ago, and it was at an event called Bowling for Boobies, which was a charity event for breast cancer research, and this is years
Hmm.
ago. I didn't talk to the man. I dared not speak to the man after crossing his line, but he, like, went to step forward to bowl, and we did it at the same time, and he just stopped, and he was just very serious, right? He had, like, this mustache on at the time, and
Of
it's
course.
just, like, right there, the bowling ball, and it was almost like, "Excuse me, sir." Was kinda like the look on his face, and so that's my only interaction with the man. I'm sure he's hilarious, I'm sure he's awesome, but don't cross the man's line as he's bowling for, like, strikes, you know what I mean? So, that's the only tale of the tape I can have there, but, kind of fun there because I think he had a team or something as part of that event, but, no, 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 but you bring up those little cameos are really good, and I didn't realize the woman who plays the landlady, she's Daniel Caruso's mom in Karate Kid, and
Oh wow, I didn't notice
yeah,
that either.
yeah, so that's that actress, and because I was like, "Why does she look familiar to me? What is it?" And she looks definitely different now than when she would have 40 years ago, but,
Sure.
that it's always fun to kinda see who's popping up into these roles, and the guy who played the homeless, the hobo,
Hmm.
turns out that that guy, he's, like, made a whole niche. He's, like, gonna be, "I'm the go-to actor if you need a homeless man in your movies." And, like, he literally has, like, 20 to 30 credits of, like, homeless man number 1, homeless man. And it's, like, kind of amazing, and, of course, he was a good actor, and it was just, it was fun, but you brought up the prog rock and the music. Kudos, I don't know who the composer was and who did that music, but kudos to them because I was like, "This is actually really pretty good." Like, the
Sure.
music,
Yeah.
I was like, "I'd actually kinda kick it to that." That was kinda fun, and I guess it was original for the film as well, 'cause they just had original music by, and they didn't have any other, anything else that they were referencing to outside the obvious songs.
Yeah.
They had that going on, so I have to say, it kinda got me going like, maybe I need to, find some good prog and, get in.
New phase of life. Everyone goes through a prog phase at some point, right?
Yeah, maybe it's time to rekindle that joy,
Hmm.
and I
Absolutely.
mean, I
No.
know we're planning, if I'm not mistaken, another conversation with Charlie,
Yes.
to come on up, so I don't wanna take up too much, but if you know Charlie, the lead character's name is it's Jay, right?
William is the
William,
main
it's the
character.
name of
The actor is Jonah Ray.
Jonah,
Whoever he is.
Jonah, but
Yeah.
William, like, if you could see a little bit of Charlie in the lead character for sure
Oh
as
yeah.
well, and we could talk about that when you bring up Charlie. So it was interesting to see the loves and all that that kinda goes in. I don't wanna take away any insight that he might share when you have
Yeah.
him on the show. So we'll save some of
Cool.
that for a sequel as far as it goes.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up Destroy All Neighbors. Jonathan, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
It could be like any movie, like
A-
anything that
Anything you watched recently that you were just really into?
I'm gonna give a film a shout out here that you should look for. From what I understand is I believe Raven Banner has picked it up. So I don't know its release strategy. And this played at FilmQuest, and I had a feeling it would do well with the audience. I've never seen an audience reaction to a film like that, period. And it's a film
Hmm.
called Hundreds of Beavers. And it's everything that you shouldn't make. Like, it's black and white, it's almost a silent film, it's probably 15 minutes longer than it should be, but it is maybe the most ingenious, low budget genre film I've seen almost ever. It came from the makers of Lake Michigan Monster, which you could see on
Hmm.
Arrow, and this is their follow-up to that, and you think this film's gonna run out of steam after, like, 10, 15 minutes, and it just continues to multiply and only get better and funnier and just absolutely stick the landing, and it's a live action Looney Tunes in all the best ways, and I'm putting that on your listeners' radar and for people to watch because this thing barnstormed the festival circuit. We were pretty much the last one because of the way the festival calendar worked, and I think it world premiered at Fantastic Fest, and then I think we were the last festival or the next to last festival that it played. I think they might have been doing something local. But you guys, everybody, and I have a feeling that your listeners would be into something like this. This is a film that I don't know what it's gonna do when it actually gets released because it is kinda niche,
Yeah.
and it's definitely a film you wanna see with an audience, but it is so it's one of those films you just can't forget.
Hmm.
You just can't shake it out of your mind once you've kind of experienced it, and again, the reaction at FilmQuest and these are really good filmmakers, a lot of the audience, the crowd, and I even had guys coming up that I've known for years, and they go like, "Listen, uh, I have to tell you, I didn't just love that movie, that became one of, like, my 10 favorite films of all time, and these are, like, people, like, who are fairly established, and you're just sitting here like, Okay, something's happened here." So I wanna put it out here because I definitely think when that film comes out, that should definitely be a film that you circle and find a way to get more eyeballs on because there's a mad genius at work with that, and I'd love to see what those guys could do. But it's almost because they only have, like, $30,000 or whatever they have, that it's even to be able to be better. So you almost wonder, man, if they had $2,000,000, would it have the same magic? And
Right.
so
Right.
it's one of those things, but I'm gonna put that on there, not because, I mean, we could talk about all sorts of other films like Saltburn and why it's interesting to watch as you're watching it, and then you realize how it's all just a farce because there's nothing that actually justifies anybody's actions in the film. Like, I could get into that if I wanted to, right? And so you start to be like you're, like, enjoying the drink as it goes down, but then after you, like, start to get the aftertaste of it, you're like, "Wait a minute here."
Good metaphor.
You know? And that wasn't Coca-Cola. That was like, what was that? You know what I mean? Like, did somebody, like, spike my coffee? You gotta sit there and you start to think about it, there, but there's some films I've definitely seen, but I'm gonna go back a couple months to that experience there and put it on everybody's radar because I absolutely think it should be on people's radar, especially in light of
Yeah.
this kind of manic, destroy all neighbors that we're talking about.
Sure, absolutely. I actually cannot wait to see this movie. I had a few people who saw it at Fest that recommended it to me, and I'm hoping we all get to see it soon because it sounds insane. I just love on Letterboxd the caption underneath hundreds of beavers. It says possibly thousands. That's just I'm sold
Yeah.
right
I mean,
there.
and to give people an idea, like, go check out the trailers for this, and to give you an idea, like, this is a film where the beavers, they're not a practical effect, they're not a real beaver, it's literally people in beaver suits that you see the zippers of throughout the entire film with giant beaver paw shoes on and stuff, and it tells you the power and magic of cinema when you go all in into this world that you created, and I mean, you go in with the gusto and you just pretend this is just the world that we're living in,
Yeah.
pretty quickly, the audience, you've bought in. You're in,
Yeah.
and you just accept that's what this world is, and sometimes, we get so caught up in as not just film lovers and filmmakers, cinephiles and connoisseurs, we could get so caught up in the pretentious end of things, right? And the craftsmanship and all the cinema, right? Like we
Mhm.
could get so caught up
Mhm.
in it and we forget that cinema is still just a magic trick
Yeah.
and we're all just in for this ride from different magicians, and some of them have something really hokey or refined, and they all have different acts, and you just have to kind of appreciate the act for what it is. And sometimes we try to put everything all into one, like the whole spread, the whole Thanksgiving dinner just goes onto one table when we don't realize that there's all sorts of different types of buffets that you can enjoy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is cinema right there.
Yeah.
But Jonathan, tell people where they can find more about you and about FilmQuest.
Yeah, thank you. Who doesn't love talking about themselves and what they do, right? Is
I'm on 100 podcasts a year, like talking about myself. I
Yeah,
got
yeah, make it happen. This is how it
it.
goes. Yeah, if you wanna see more about, like, what I do, some of my work, I could probably update the website a little bit. My website, my personal production company is Bohemian Industries, so you could check out bohemianindustries.com. It's exactly how it spells, and if you have to look it up, that's fine too, all good. And then, obviously, FilmQuest, you could if you're a filmmaker and you're looking to submit either a screenplay or a project, we are a genre festival. It's amazing how many people submit with something that is absolutely not genre in the slightest, but, I mean, we're telling them. So you can submit to us on Film Freeway, and you could obviously get more information about the festival through our website, which is FilmQuest Fest, short for festival, and, FEST.com. So filmquestfest.com, and feel free to reach out if you got a question, if you got an inquiry, if you wanna do a project, we can see where things land, right? There used to be a time I was, "No, it must be my own project that I must go forward with," right? Like,
Mm.
being a naive, egotistical filmmaker, and then you realize you're probably not gonna get a lot if you do that, and so I'm open to talking to people about your project. It may or may not be a fit to help each other out, but if you'd like to talk about it, let me know, and we'll go from there, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Awesome. I mean, you might be hearing from me at some point about a
Yeah.
project, but we'll see what happens. But Jonathan, thank you so much for doing this. We're gonna, like you mentioned earlier, we're gonna be talking to Charles in another future episode very soon. But maybe we'll get you back for another regular piecing it together sometime.
I'd love it. Listen, I am always now that we've done this and now that I've had my first rodeo, now, I feel I can put my boots on and maybe a little belt buckle, and we can, tie a lasso together. So
There you go.
let's have me on. We'll figure it out. We'll go from there, and, I look forward to it.
I'm Josh Bell.
And I'm Jason Harris, and we co-host a podcast called Awesome Movie Year.
Each season, we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year.
We deep dive into these specific years, and we pick out why they were such great years for films. We go over the biggest hits, the biggest flops, the best pictures, some personal picks, some cult classics.
Years we've covered in past seasons include 1994, 2003, 1977, and 1984, and we've got all of film history to look forward to. So check us out at awesomemovieyear.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Destroy All Neighbors. Thank you to Jonathan Martin for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure you are subscribed wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And if you have a moment, maybe drop us a little 5-star rating and review. It helps make sure that more people find out about the podcast, and then we could keep doing all kinds of fun stuff with it, like the live shows I've been doing, and get into all kinds of fun stuff, including, like Jonathan mentioned, we're going to be doing an interview with the writer of Destroy All Neighbors, which will be up on the podcast next week. So keep on listening, keep on subscribing, listen to the episodes, share the episodes, and let's keep doing fun stuff. So I already told you at the top of the show that you can follow us on social media at PiecingPod. You could also join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. We also have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, from Awesome Movie Year, which is another movie podcast that I produce, and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. And we have a new way that you could also support the show with our Vouch store. It's vouch.store/piecing it together. And there's some great products in there that you can buy. And of course, we get a little kickback when you do. You guys know I'm a big coffee drinker, and we're selling some Split Rock coffee. There's dark roast, light roast, both whole bean and ground. really amazing coffee. You can get some of that there. There's also other stuff like mixed drinks bundles and all kinds of cool stuff. Check out the store if you want to support the show. It's vouch.store/piecing it together. We'll be doing more stuff, adding more products there in the coming months. But yeah, there's all kinds of ways that you can support Piecing It Together, and I do appreciate you being out there and listening. So we always close these out with a piece of my music. Right now, I'm in the middle of my 24 for 2024 series, but I'm going to go back, this Destroy All Neighbors being this, again, the combination of rock and roll and ridiculous gore and over-the-top craziness. I got to go to the theme song that I made for the movie Bus Party to Hell from about 6 years ago. This is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about here. I could have even used Bus Party to Hell as a puzzle piece for this movie, but this is a very ridiculous movie from director Rolf Konevsky and produced by the Mahal brothers here in Las Vegas. It is a very ridiculous, over-the-top mix of rock and roll and gore and demons and all kinds of crazy stuff. Severed heads, too. We talked about decapitated heads talking in this movie. But anyway, enjoy this track. Again, it's the theme song from Bus Party to Hell. You can rent that movie, too. And we'll be back with more Piecing It Together very soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.